The only little good things you do, they make me no. This distance is taking a hold of me for sure. Baby, come.
Hey guys, welcome back to A Glimpse of Ray, where my name is Ray. I am married and have been married for 7 years, and we have 3 kids with autism and on the spectrum all across the board. So today we're going to talk about my 6-year-old that is on the spectrum along with other diagnoses. For context, Trey has been diagnosed with autism, ADHD, apraxia, and intellectual disability, and a severe speech delay. Goes by Trey. I'm just gonna give kind of like a backstory on like the traits, the signs that we saw in him. We went about getting him evaluated and so forth. So he was diagnosed in September of 2020. As a backstory of from when he was born, like when he hit certain stages and so forth. When he hit 4 months old, I remember his first word being mama. That was something he would say often. And then I never noticed when he stopped saying it. But then I remember him being a baby. He didn't really like being touched, but if you did hold him, he wanted you to hold him a certain way. Um, this is all within the first year that he was born. I also noticed that he would stare at ceiling fans. Like if you were talking to him or trying to get his attention, he would stare at ceiling fans, sit on the couch and like bang his body up against the couch really hard in a rocking motion. Notice he wasn't really too big on like eye contact. I didn't think anything of it. He's an infant. So obviously, I didn't really think anything of it. By the time he turned 1, he was able to say grandma and Tyler, which is his younger brother's name. So at the age of 1, he was saying those things. And then I just noticed one day he no longer said those 2 words. And then when I thought back more on it, I was like, dang, he used to say mama and he doesn't say it anymore either. But I never noticed when he stopped saying it. One day I just noticed I noticed like, oh, he doesn't say it anymore. His tantrums didn't seem kind of like normal tantrums. Every time he had a tantrum, it resulted in him trying to break things or him trying to hurt himself. I also remember around the time that he was 1, I started trying to potty train him, and I was doing something with him called elimination communication. So that is basically when you go off of cues to potty train your child, which meant I would put him on the potty when he first woke up, maybe 10 minutes after he had a cup of juice, or 10 minutes after he ate, or right before bed. And he never really grasped the concept of it. Now it's a completely different story, but it took years to get to where we're at now. So at that time, I was doing something called elimination communication with him. I noticed he didn't really talk as much. He didn't really say any words. His behavior more so caught my attention more so than his speech and what he was and was not saying. I paid more attention to his behavior. So at the time, I've always been a stay-at-home mom, but at the time, my husband worked 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts, so I was always at home with the kids. And when I noticed these things, I was just kind of like, it doesn't seem right, but I didn't put as much thought into it as I should. And then as his tantrums would get worse and I would notice certain things about his behavior, I was just kind of like, you know, I think he's like maybe a little bit delayed. I think during that time, I was really like brushed off, like being honest. I was brushed off. And so I had maybe 2 people that kind of listened to me, what I was seeing and what I was noticing, and was like, okay, maybe you should get him looked at because of those things. I remember, a lot of times being brushed off, whether it was by family or even by his pediatrician. I remember telling his pediatrician, like, hey, I think that there's something off, or a little different about him because he seems like a little behind. And everybody that didn't that kind of downplayed how I was feeling, the response was always, "Oh, boys develop slower," or "He'll grow out of it." That was always the response that I got. So I had to really keep pushing. And then one day we took him to his appointment. I can't even remember for what it was for, but it was like a regular checkup, and I had to fill out the form. I cannot remember for the life of me what the form was called, but I had to fill out the form of what he could and could not do. And filling out that form and seeing like he can only do maybe two or three of these things. And mind you, the thing I had to fill out was about 2 or 3 pages. And so the pediatrician came in, she grabbed it, she walked out, she came back and she said, "Hey, I think I should maybe put in a referral to get him evaluated and see if he has autism." Now, mind you, just to go back a little bit, um, autism had popped into my head, but autism was never anything that I was by instinct. I knew that that's what he had. That hadn't crossed my mind. Even when I was thinking, "Oh, he's a little bit delayed, like there's something a little different about him." Autism was never the first thing that popped into my head. Autism was not something that I was around really growing up. And if I was around it, I did not know. I'm 30. So if you're around my age, then you know that something like autism wasn't really talked about when we were younger. In our generation growing up, it wasn't really something that was discussed and so forth. She said, "I think we should put in a referral to get him evaluated." And so we did that. And I kind of finally felt heard. Like, I'm coming to people, I'm saying, "Hey, this is what I'm noticing." And someone's actually finally listening to me in a sense. So we went through getting him evaluated. Before that, what happened was the referral went out to the insurance. An insurance company will pick somebody, pick a doctor's office. The doctor's office then reached out to me to call me to make an appointment. They scheduled with us and we did an intake. Mind you, at this point, I still hadn't even done research. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was very much so winging it, okay? We did the intake, and during the intake, what they do is they have you fill out, a questionnaire. You'll talk to a doctor, and they'll say, "Okay, what is it about your child that you need evaluated or what's going on?" You tell them, and then that's the parent intake. Then they will then schedule you to come back for the actual evaluation, which is typically 2 to 3 hours long. During the intake, she tells she dumps out a bunch of toys for Trey. Trey picks up all the soccer balls or like little basketballs or whatever and all the cars, and he goes sits in a corner and he faces the wall and he plays with the toys by himself. She tried engaging with him. He had no interest in it. She saw him drinking out of his cup, and as he would drink out of his cup, he looked out the corner of his eye. Um, as she watched him a little bit more, she said, "I'm definitely going to do the evaluation." And just by watching him, I can already tell I already know he's on the spectrum. So it wasn't a shock. It was just like, oof. Also, one tip that I will give, if you are in the process of or about to get your child evaluated, something that I did was I took videos and pictures of everything that I saw that Trey did that was an autistic trait or sign. I put it into one photo album and I showed the doctor that was evaluating him when the time came. Only because you could say that your child does, all these things, but unless they see it at that very moment, they can't go by what you say that your child does. So everything that he did do that he didn't actually do during the evaluation, I showed the doctor, and I showed her the videos so that she actually knew, and believed what I was saying. And she was like, "I've never had a parent or a guardian come like do that. I've never had someone that's actually bring the video footage or pictures or whatever the case was that could show what their child did." So I would recommend doing that also. Just because, like I said, they can only go by what they see your child do. If they don't see your child do the things that you're talking about, they can't go by it. Here's where I will tell you all, like up until the evaluation, all the signs that I saw in Trey. The signs that I saw was his limited eye contact. He didn't really give much of any kind eye contact, and if he did, it was extremely limited. It wouldn't even last a minute. He didn't consistently respond to his name. Anytime that he would go for walk, we would go for walks outside. He always walked along the edge of the sidewalk. He never walked in the middle. When he would walk, he never looked in front of him. He always looked down to the side or behind him. He never looked in front of him, which is a problem he still has. He's gotten a lot better, but he never looked forward when he would walk. Um, he would pace constantly. It was constantly him running, jumping, pacing, a lot of vocal stimming that he would do, whether it be screaming certain sounds with his tongue, whether it would be grinding his teeth. He was always doing some kind of vocal stimming. He was very picky with food. If he didn't like the way that food looked, like certain food colors, um, he didn't like things that were like red, for example. Like if you give him goldfish and it's like the red pieces of goldfish in there too, he will pick them all out. I noticed that foods that he used to love, he no longer liked. He would only eat things of a certain texture. Another thing that Trey did was he would eat non-food items, so we had to keep a lot of things out of his reach. Um, in the past, he's eaten things like styrofoam, cardboard. Um, he's tried to eat like the laundry detergent pods before, so he has had that issue before with eating non-food items. That was another thing that he did that was a trait. Sometimes it's very hard to distinguish because autism is such a spectrum. Sometimes it is very hard to distinguish um, what your child is doing that falls under autism and what falls under ADHD. And a lot of times, autism and ADHD fall under the same thing. And a good amount of times, if you have autism, there is a chance that you will have ADHD too. And that's not in everybody's cases. I'm just speaking from my experience because I am not a doctor. I'm just speaking from my experience, what I've learned and what I know now to this day. He liked things done in a certain order, and he had to have everything or do everything two times. So if he wanted a snack, he had to have two graham crackers. If it was Ritz crackers, he had to have two Ritz crackers. If we went for a walk, we would have to go around two times, or it will lead to a meltdown once we went to the house. Um, Everything that he did, everything that he wanted or had to have, it had to be in twos. So that was something else that I noticed. Um, I noticed that when it came to fine motor skills and gross motor skills, I noticed he didn't start eating, like feeding himself with a spoon until he turned almost two. That was something that we worked on for a long time, and he did not grasp that concept until he was two. Oh, headbanging. Headbanging was a big thing. Even when he was an infant, we would notice, like within his first year of life, we noticed that if he was in his crib, he would get on all fours and he would rock his body really hard up against the crib, like banging his body up against the crib. And we were like, that's weird. Like, why is he doing that? But at the time, I was like, oh, it must be something soothing to him. If he's laying in a bed, which is something he still does now, if he's laying in a bed, then he'll bang his head up against the mattress to help him fall asleep. These were all things that we noticed that were kind of signs of autism. So for Trey, if you see him in person, he is what I would say textbook autistic. Like, you don't have to look at him and question, like, he doesn't seem like he has autism. Like, it's very obvious if you see him. Whereas to my 5-year old, if you see him because he's mild on the spectrum and he's communicative and he'll hold a conversation with you, people will question a lot if, are you sure he's autistic? It's not like that for Trey. For Trey, he really, it's very obvious. Trey also did have trouble with follow pointing. which, if you don't know what that means, it's like if I point to this, would your eyes directly go to that? That's follow pointing. If I point to this and then you still looking at me, like that's not follow pointing in a sense. I hope that makes sense. Just, a lot of things that we noticed with him once we got him evaluated and diagnosed, it was kind of like for me and his dad, it wasn't a surprise. We knew that would be the results. Our thing was, okay, now we can do what we need to do to get him the help that he needs. I did not expect to have another child diagnosed with autism right after that, because for him, we already expected it. Like, Trey was also nonverbal at the time, and he's been nonverbal majority of his life. We prefer to refer to him as limited verbal because there are some words, some phrases he could say, but on paper, if it's like school or like a doctor's office, they will refer to him as nonverbal. Trey can say a handful of words. He is getting better with speaking. He is getting better with toilet training. He's pretty much potty trained for the most part. He just won't tell you when he has to go. He'll go sit on the toilet somewhere, and then, at some point you hear him yelling hello from the bathroom. Also had no interest in playing with other kids. He would walk right past them. He had no sense of danger. So he would walk right past somebody, walk right into anybody. He didn't have any sense of awareness. So he didn't really notice other people around him, other kids that would try to come and talk to him. He had no interest in them. Now he's a lot better. He has an interest in other kids, but he is currently trying to learn how to interact with other kids because that's something he still struggles with, but he tries to. Also had a very and still has a very high pain tolerance. I've seen Trey bump his head, hit his head, fall off things, and not cry and keep going. He has a very high pain tolerance, which is another sign of autism. Now he has that sense of comforting somebody, which at one point Trey did not have that. If you're crying, Trey will come up. If you're crying or you cough or you sneeze, Trey will come up to you and he will say, "Are you okay?" If he sees a baby, he'll say, "Oh, baby." He's still learning, but if he sees you, he wants to say hi to everybody. If he sees you, he'll say, "How are you?" He doesn't know how to carry on the conversation after that, but he will ask, "How are you?" So he's made a lot of progress. He's still learning. He still has some things he's trying to adjust to and get better at, but he has made a lot of improvement. So what I will say before I go is, if you suspect that your child may be on the spectrum or just anything, do not hesitate to get your child the help that they need. Do not downplay it. Do not brush it off. At the end of the day, you are your child's biggest advocate. Okay. And I pray that one day, especially in the Black community, that it stops being something where it's downplayed in a sense where everybody's so quick to say boys develop slower, they'll grow out of it, ain't nothing wrong with them. You're right, there's nothing wrong with that child. But if that child can get the help that they need, get them the help that they need. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a professional, I'm just speaking on my experience. So if you feel like there's something about your child that should be looked at, should be talked about, should be helped with, that they might need some kind of support, get your child the help that they need. Don't hesitate to do it. No matter how many people try to downplay you, downplay what you're thinking, no matter how many people try to brush it off, you know your child best. Get your child the help that they need. With that being said, I'm going to go, and I will see you guys on my next video where I will talk about my 5-year-old Tyler and his signs and how he got evaluated and diagnosed. If you liked what you saw and if you want to see more, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram at _SlayByRay. So with that being said, bye.